They say the gods have long memories. So when Chief Kwaku Owusu, CEO of Akansa Holdings and proud son of Kumasi, walked out on the woman who had labored beside him, built beside him, bled beside him, just to chase skin newer than wisdom, he thought the ancestors were asleep. He thought wrong. Years later, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the wealth of the city, she walked in. Not with vengeance on her tongue, but with power in her steps and silence in her smile. She was no longer the wife. She was the new boss. But let us not rush. Come closer, child, and let me tell you a story. A story not just of a man and a woman, but of dreams, betrayal, the whispers of ancestors in the wind, and the way karma dances in high heels on marble floors. Cityscape hash in the heart of Kumasi before the fall, there was a rise. Kwaku was born in a family of name but no wealth. His father died with his head high but his pocket empty. His mother, a nurse who walked the night shift roads with swollen feet, taught him the value of resilience. He met Abena when they were both just saplings, young university students with laughter louder than coins. She was the daughter of a seamstress, raised in a compound house in Asafo, with the scent of Kapok Shito and boiled eggs forever trailing behind her. But oh, her mind. Sharp like the sting of a forest bee. She read law, he studied finance. At night, they would sit under the broken fan in their one room and dream. Together. When we rise as one, he would say, head resting on her lap as she braided ambition into his hair. He built Akansa Holdings with Abena's breath behind every decision. When banks said no, it was her lawyer's tongue that got them yes. When deals turned sour, it was her prayers and plans that steered them back. But money, my child, is like the sea. If you do not anchor your soul, it will drown you in whispers of want. Broken heart, the turning of eyes. By the time Akansa Holdings became one of Ghana's leading investment firms, Kwaku no longer smelled of pepper soup and shared taxi sweat. He wore imported suits and traveled on private jets. And Abena? She still sat by his side, but the side was now a shadow. It started with the late-night meetings. Then the new secretary with laughter like glass chimes. Then the lunches at Kempinski for Business. Then the perfume that wasn't hers on his collar. Then the silence. One day, he came home, laid the keys to their house on the table, and said 5 words that shattered 30 years. I think we should separate. No fight. No warning. Just cold. Abena stood there, steady as the baobab. Is it her? She asked. He looked away. I'm sorry. She packed her things that night. Left the house she had designed. The house she had chosen bricks for. She took only her clothes, her books, and a small golden frame, one with their wedding picture inside, taken under the mango tree of her family home. The next day, Kwaku married Amma, the younger woman, the laughter in tight dresses, the ambition draped in beauty. They said it was love. The ancestors called it foolishness. Fire the silent years. Abena disappeared like dusk swallowed by night. People asked. She never answered. But silence does not mean stillness. She moved to Accra, into a small flat in East Legon. Took consulting jobs at first. Then founded her own firm, Ebarbek Legal and Strategy Group. Quietly. Carefully. She never shouted. She built. 4 years, Kwaku flourished on the outside. His company expanded. His new wife gave him a daughter. He sat on panels, gave interviews, hosted galas. But inside, the rot had begun. Amma had charm, yes, but charm is not loyalty. Nor is it patience. Nor memory. And when the business began to falter, when a wrong investment shook the empire, she did not stay. She left him. Left him with a house full of silence and a name under review by the Ghana Revenue Authority. The winds were shifting. Prayer beads, the whisper of ancestors in Kumasi, the old women whispered. Did he not think the gods were watching? And in the hills of Aburi, where Abena sometimes drove on Sundays to listen to the birds, the wind brought messages from her foremothers. Daughter, rise. So she did. Her firm had grown. Slowly. Ethically. She trained young women. Hired single mothers. Took on government contracts with quiet integrity. One day, she was approached by an international investment group, one looking to acquire a distressed but promising African firm. The name? Ancestral Holdings. There are betrayals that wound. And then there are betrayals that water the roots of destiny. After Abena walked away from the home she built with Kwaku, the city forgot her for a while. But the ancestors did not. Nor did the gods who tend to the wounded hearts of women who gave their all. She worked in silence. Grew in silence. While the world clapped for Kwaku, she wrote her future in ink too deep to erase. Now, listen carefully. For the moment the hunter becomes the hunted always begins with a whisper. Cityscape # the collapse begins. Ancestral Holdings stood tall, a giant among mid-sized firms in West Africa. But giants forget that termites work in silence. The deals that once flowed easily became tangled. A major energy partnership in Côte d'Ivoire fell through. A real estate project in Kumasi drained more capital than it returned. Investors began to murmur. Amma, the once beaming wife, no longer found the perks worth the pretense. She withdrew, both emotionally and financially. Her father, a retired judge, had advised her to secure her own assets. So when the ship began to tilt, she took her purse and stepped off. Kwaku, aging and weary, could not sleep. He sat by his wide window at night, staring at the blinking lights of Accra. His phone no longer rang as it used to. Invitations to events dried up. The board, once filled with loyal old men who owed him their fortunes, was now younger, colder. The world, it seemed, was shifting beneath him. One day, he walked into the boardroom for an emergency meeting. What he found there chilled him. A foreign acquisition team. 3 white investors from Zurich. 1 Ghanaian consultant seated at the head of the table, with her back to him. She stood slowly when he entered. Turned around. Looked him in the eye. It was her. Abena. Fire the wind turns he froze. Not because of guilt, but because for the first time in years, he did not know what to say. She wore a black-fitted dress, simple but commanding. A gold pin shaped like an Adinkra symbol Eben, the symbol of safety and security, glinted on her chest. Her hair was pulled back. Her expression unreadable. "Good morning, Mr. Owusu," she said, voice calm as moonlight. "Shall we begin?" She was not vengeful. She was not angry. She was prepared. And that, child, is the most terrifying thing a betrayed woman can become. The acquisition was legal. Strategic. Ethical. Her firm had guided the international investors, ensuring jobs were protected and assets restructured. But the message was clear, she had come full circle. Years earlier, on the very day Kwaku had handed her divorce papers, Abena had wandered into Makola Market. She had roamed, buying nothing, just absorbing the chaos and rhythm of the place. There, seated by a stack of Kent cloth, was an old woman with silver eyes. "Daughter," she said, though Abena had said nothing. "When the snake sheds its skin, it does not lose its venom. Only its camouflage." Abena had stood still. "Your wound is deep," the woman continued. "But there is power in pain. Let it teach you how to hold the knife by the handle, not the blade." She never forgot those words. It was that night she registered her company. The rebirth of power in the boardroom. Kwaku listened in silence as she presented the restructuring plan. "Your severance will be honored," she said. "The company will retain your name out of respect for its legacy. But in the future, you will not be involved in leadership." He wanted to protest. Wanted to scream. But what argument could he offer that wouldn't sound pitiful? He had made her small so long that he never noticed when she grew too large for the corner he tried to keep her in. Now, she stood not as his wife, not as his former, but as his superior. And child, let me tell you this, the silence of a woman who has survived betrayal is louder than thunder. Moral from the ancestors that night, in her apartment overlooking Lab 1, Abena sat on her balcony with a cup of lemongrass tea. Her assistant, a young intern from Ho-Ho, asked her softly, "How did you know this day would come?" Abena smiled. "I didn't," she said. "But I knew I couldn't stay broken. And sometimes, the journey away from betrayal leads you straight to your throne." The girl blinked. "Did it hurt?" "Every day." Until it stopped. And then I grew. The stars blinked above. Below, somewhere in the city, Kwaku poured himself another glass of whiskey, alone in the house once filled with laughter. He looked at the wedding photo still framed in his drawer. Abena's face, youthful and full of promise, stared back at him. He wept. But the ancestors. They danced. They say when a man climbs the Iroko tree with pride, it is not the height that humbles him, but the fall. And so Kwaku, once the golden rooster of Ghana's financial skyline, found himself a guest in his own legacy, watching the woman he once cast aside now command the floor with grace, precision, and authority. But poetic justice is never only about the fall. It is also about the journey of the one who was once silenced. Come closer, child. This part of the tale is where the past and future dance together, where dreams resurrect and the dead weight of regret begins to speak. Performing arts echoes in the corridor. The weeks that followed the acquisition were cold ones for Kwaku. He still came to the office out of habit, though he had no title now. Some whispered he came to spy, others said he came to grieve. But truly, he came to feel less invisible. He would walk the corridors of Akansa, now adorned with new branding and slogans: integrity, innovation, restoration. Words that felt like salt to his memory. One morning, as he stood by the elevators pretending to check his phone, he overheard two interns whispering. "Isn't that the man who built all this?" "Yes," said the other. "But he's no longer in charge. The new boss, her name is Abena, she's the real mind behind everything now." Kwaku turned away before they could see the pain on his face. It wasn't just the loss of power. It was the rewriting of his myth, now shaped not by his voice, but hers. Far from the city, in a quiet village where the trees remembered names, Abena traveled with her mother. She hadn't returned since her father's funeral. The compound house had aged. The walls now bore cracks like the wrinkles of time. But the small family shrine in the corner remained untouched, guarded by dust, incense, and the memory of her ancestors. Her mother, still sharp and wide-eyed, placed kola nuts before the shrine and whispered prayers. Abena knelt beside her. Not in desperation, but in gratitude. "You've come far," her mother said. "I've come through fire," Abena replied softly. The priestess arrived shortly after, old, bent like a question mark, with cowries around her neck and a staff carved from ebony. She looked into Abena's eyes and said, "You carry your hurt well." Like a queen balancing a calabash on her head. Abena did not speak. The old woman threw cowries onto a woven mat. "The one who left you now walks with shadows," she said. "Not because you cursed him, but because he cursed himself. A man who forgets his helper invites hunger into his home." Abena bowed her head. "Do not return to your past to rescue what was never yours," the priestess added. "Let the wound be your wisdom." In Accra's business circles, the story began to spread. "Did you hear? The man who left his wife, she's now the one running his company. It's poetic. No, it's ancestral. That's why you don't joke with women who pray with both fire and reason." Abena, for her part, never indulged the gossip. When asked in interviews, she simply said, "Leadership isn't about vengeance. It's about vision. I don't lead to punish. I lead to build." But those who knew her story, they listened with both awe and quiet celebration. One elder from the Chamber of Commerce leaned into a microphone at a gala and declared, "Let this be a lesson. When you throw away a diamond for glass, you will soon cut yourself." One Thursday morning, Kwaku requested a meeting. Not with the board. With her. They sat in a small conference room. No assistants. No cameras. Just two people who once dreamed under a ceiling fan, now separated by years, wounds, and a mahogany table. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he began. She did not interrupt. "I was foolish. I thought love had to look a certain way. I thought age meant lack. I thought new meant better. Still, she said nothing. I miss what we had." Finally, Abena spoke. "We didn't have it, Kwaku. We built it. Together. I didn't marry your money or your name. I married your dream. I carried it when it was too heavy for you. And you left me for someone who didn't know how to hold it. Kwaku lowered his head. She continued, softer now. I don't hate you. I healed beyond that. But I will not carry you anymore. That season is over. He stood to leave, hands trembling. Thank you, for being better than I deserved. As he reached the door, she added gently, make peace with your past, Kwaku. Or it will keep you company until the end. In Ababek Legal, Abena gathered her team of young women lawyers, strategists, analysts, some of whom had come from disadvantaged backgrounds. She told them, do not build your dreams on someone else's shoulders. If someone chooses to walk with you, let them. But never forget how to walk alone. One girl asked, do you still believe in love? Abena smiled. I believe in respect. In a shared vision. If love grows in that garden, I'll welcome it. The room clapped quietly. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, a legacy was being rewritten, not in revenge, but in renewal. In every African city, no matter how tall the buildings or bright the lights, some whispers live in the trees, in the gutters, in the quiet spaces between footsteps. And those whispers, they belong to the ancestors. They do not forget. They do not sleep. They only wait until the time is ripe, until the drumbeat aligns with justice. This, child, is the part of the story where the ancestors begin to speak not with thunder, but with dreams that disturb and truths that rise like morning mist over the rooftops of the city. Kwaku began to wake with wet eyes and shaking hands. In his dreams, he would see himself back in the compound house of his youth. His mother, in her faded Kent wrapper, would call to him from a distance, but he could never reach her. There was always mud. Always rain. And a black goat standing in the path, staring. One night, the dream changed. He saw himself at the head of a great feast, his old board members, journalists, politicians, all clapping. And beside him sat Amma, glowing, laughing. But then Abena entered the room. Not in anger. Not in shame. She walked robed in white, with gold thread woven into her sleeves. She placed a mirror before him. He looked and saw a man with no reflection. He woke gasping. That morning, he went to the house shrine his mother had kept. It was dusty. And cared for. Just like his soul. Some reckonings require travel. And so, Kwaku took a road trip north to Tarkiman, to visit his mother's last living brother Uncle Bobo, a retired herbalist known for his wisdom and bluntness. When Kwaku arrived, Bobo was seated under a mango tree, stirring a calabash of palm wine. You're too thin, Bobo said. And you walk like the wind is heavier than you. I've made mistakes, Kwaku replied. You say that like a banker. Not like a man. They sat in silence. Finally, Kwaku whispered, I lost her. And now she stands above me. I used to call her wife. Now I call her boss. Bobo chuckled. The gods are comedians, my son. But they do not play without reason. Kwaku looked up. I chose beauty over wisdom. Pleasure over loyalty. And you learned, Bobo said. That's the thing about clay pots. Sometimes they must crack before they find their purpose again. But the question is not what you lost, it is what you will now do with the broken pieces. In Accra, Abena was being honored. She had been selected as one of Africa's 100 most influential women in business. A gala was to be held in Kigali, and her face graced the cover of multiple business magazines. But Abena wasn't dancing. She was planning. You see, child, true queens don't just sit on thrones, they build ladders behind them. Abena started a mentorship program for young female entrepreneurs. She called it the Matriarch's Path. Each mentee received funding, mentorship, and access to her legal and strategy team. Reporters asked her, why not retire? You've already proven your worth. She answered, when your footprints are deep enough, the ones behind you won't sink. And somewhere, in a small office downtown, a teenage girl from Nima whispered to her friend, one day, I'll be like her. Back in Accra, Kwaku did the unthinkable. He sold his car. Sold his house. He moved into a modest apartment in Adabraka and began volunteering at a youth center, teaching financial literacy to teenage boys. At first, they laughed at him. Weren't you the guy whose wife became his boss? But slowly, they began to listen. Because his shame had softened into wisdom. And wisdom, when spoken from humility, plants deep roots. One evening, he received an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Kwaku, I heard you're teaching now. That suits you. Teaching is for those who have survived enough to know better. I hope you are well. Abena, no bitterness. Just acknowledgement. And somehow, that was heavier than anger. On the eve of the Kigali Gala, Abena passed through Makola Market again. And once more, the old woman was there. Same silver eyes. Same stack of Kent. I see you listened, she said. I did. And what did it cost? Everything that didn't belong to me. The old woman smiled. You wear power like cloth now, not like armor. Good. That is how women change worlds. Abena handed her a new wrapper, custom woven, golden thread through indigo. Thank you. No need, daughter. Just promise me one thing. What? When they sing your name, don't forget the silence that birthed it. Abena nodded. And the wind carried that promise away. They say when a woman rises, she does not walk alone, she carries her mother, her grandmother, and the daughters yet unborn. And when Abena boarded the plane to Kigali, Rwanda's city of 1,000 hills, the sky knew she was not just a woman attending a gala. She was a message. A lesson wrapped in Ankara, walking in heels, her past folded quietly behind her, her future glowing just ahead. As the aircraft rose over Accra's blinking lights and curved toward the east, Abena sat by the window, a glass of hibiscus juice untouched in her hand. She was not nervous. But she was listening. To the voice within her, the one she had learned to trust after years of being silenced by loyalty. It spoke now in a hum. In the silence between heartbeats. Remember who you are. Remember who you are not. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she saw her younger self again. Barefoot in Asafo, reading under kerosene light, head full of dreams and a heart that didn't yet know how much it would bleed. But she was no longer that girl. She had become the storm that learned to calm itself. Kigali welcomed her with cool winds and streets so clean they looked swept by angels. Her hotel suite overlooked a valley of red roofs and eucalyptus trees. The scent of fresh chapati wafted up from a vendor near the gate. The gala was 2 days away. But her schedule was full. Media interviews, panel discussions, closed-door mentoring sessions with young Rwandan women hungry for guidance. In one such session, a girl named Nadij asked, Madam Abena, how do you forgive someone who took everything from you? Abena looked her in the eye and said gently, you don't forgive for them. You forgive so they no longer live inside you rent-free. Forgiveness is how you change the locks. And the room grew silent. Then clapped. The night of the gala arrived like a poem dressed in diamonds. The Kigali Convention Center glowed gold beneath the starlight. Inside, rows of dignitaries, presidents, CEOs, scholars sat in reverent anticipation. When her name was announced, a softer dour rhythm played in the background. She walked slowly to the podium. Calm. Tall. Glowing. My name is Abena Yermensima, she began. I am the daughter of a seamstress, the granddaughter of a woman who sold firewood and raised 9 children without losing her smile. I was once a wife. I am now a leader. I was once broken. I am now whole. Silence. Then breath. Then more. Many will tell you success means never falling. But in our land, the baobab grows not because it avoids the wind, but because it learned to dig deeper when the storm came. Applause. Soft, then rising. She smiled. In this room, many wear suits. Some wear scars. I wear both. A standing ovation. Not for power, but for truth. Kwaku watched her speech on his old laptop, streamed live on YouTube. He had meant to avoid it. Meant to go to sleep. But something in him wanted to witness her moment. And when he saw her on that stage, so poised, so honest, so unreachable, his heart swelled with something unexpected. Not jealousy. Not regret. But he wept. And this time, he did not wipe the tears away. They were baptizing him. The next morning, Abena received a text. From a number she had not saved, but remembered. It read, "I watched you speak last night. You were brilliant. Thank you for becoming the woman you were always meant to be, even if I was the reason you had to find her alone." She stared at the message, then placed the phone down, and said nothing. Some ghosts don't need exorcism. They just need acknowledgement. Before leaving Kigali, Abena visited the Inema Arts Center, a sanctuary of color and soul. There, she stood before a painting of a woman with roots for legs, stars in her eyes, and flames dancing in her hair. The artist, a young man from Nyamirambo, walked up and said, "She is called the Becoming." Abena nodded. "She looks like my life. She looks like all our mothers," he replied. She bought the painting. Not for her office, but for the hallway of her home, so that every morning, she would walk past her own reminder. You rose not to prove anyone wrong. You rose because you were always meant to. That night, on her balcony under the Kigali stars, she lit a candle and whispered her grandmother's prayer, Nsa Onyame. I will not sleep outside of God's hand. And somewhere in the unseen, her foremothers nodded. Because the revenge had never been revenge. It was poetry. It was destiny. It was the drumbeat of justice dancing in silence. In African tradition, names are more than labels. They are echoes of ancestors, prophecies wrapped in syllables, sacred markings passed from the past into the mouth of the future. Abena Yemensema's name now moved like wind through boardrooms, schools, newspapers, and prayer meetings. She had become more than a woman who overcame betrayal. She had become a symbol. But symbols are not made by triumph alone. They are forged in silence, sleepless nights, quiet prayers, and the courage to keep standing when the earth beneath your feet shifts like sand. When Abena returned to Ghana, she didn't throw a party. She hosted a women's circle at the National Theatre. No red carpets. No champagne. Just chairs, cola nuts, ginger tea, and stories. She called it, Sit. Speak. Heal. Women came from all over, Makola market traders, engineers from Tima, mothers from Kasoa, tech developers from East Legon. Each woman shared one thing she lost, and one thing she built from the ashes. One woman stood and said, I was beaten for 15 years. Now I own 3 dress shops and teach other women to sew. Another said, my husband left me because I couldn't have children. I now run an adoption agency and help others find joy in different ways. When it was Abena's turn, she smiled. I lost my name once. It became an accessory to someone else's story. But I reclaimed it. And now I sign it on paychecks, policies, and dreams. The room shook with applause. Not loud. Just firm. Like a heartbeat. One rainy Sunday, there was a knock at Abena's gate. Her house help opened it. And standing there, with an umbrella dripping and shoes covered in mud, was Amma. The younger woman. The woman Kwaku had left her for. She looked smaller than memory. Softer. I know this is strange, Amma began when Abena came to the door. But I need to speak. Abena offered her tea. Saturday. Waited. Amma fidgeted. I didn't come to gloat. I didn't come to justify. I came because I saw you on TV. And I realized I owe you something. Abena raised an eyebrow. An apology. Amma shook her head. Respect. Silence. Then Abena nodded slowly. You were young, she said. And I was angry. But time teaches us all differently. Thank you for coming. Amma stood, surprised by the grace. Your rise, it taught me something, she added. That when a woman roots herself, no wind can carry her away. She left with tear-filled eyes. Abena closed the door gently, not with satisfaction, but with peace. Months later, Abena founded the AY Mensima Leadership Institute, a finishing academy for African girls from low-income backgrounds. Each girl would receive full scholarships in law, ethics, business, and public speaking. They would be taught by women who had survived, rebuilt, and led. At the entrance of the school stood a carved wooden statue, a woman in traditional cloth, holding a broken chain in one hand and a pen in the other. The plaque below read, "In her silence, she built. In her rising, she remembered. In her power, she uplifted." One young girl, reading it aloud on her first day, whispered to her friend, "I want to be like her." Her friend replied, "No. You'll be you, and that will be enough." Kwaku was growing older now. Thinner. Softer. The boys he mentored at the youth center came to admire him not for the wealth he once had, but for the honesty he now carried. One afternoon, he invited Abena for lunch. It was awkward, but gentle. He brought out a dusty photo album. Inside, pictures of their wedding. Her in a gold head wrap. Him in a navy agbada. Both smiling as if forever was a sure thing. "I was a fool," he said. "I was too loyal," she replied. They laughed. Softly. "When I see what you've done," he added, "I don't regret losing the business. I regret not recognizing your light when it burned beside me." Abena touched his hand. We were both growing. Just not in the same direction. Before she left, he gave her something. A folded piece of paper. A poem. He had written it after her Kigali speech. It read, "I left gold to chase glitter, but gold does not beg, it shines quietly, waits patiently, and when I returned, it was not waiting, it was leading." She folded it, held it to her heart, and left. That evening, Abena sat on her veranda, watching the sun disappear behind the Accra skyline. She wasn't sad. She wasn't triumphant. She was full. Full of story. Of scars. Of strength. And she whispered, not to herself, but to the air, "Thank you." Because even betrayal had become her teacher. Even silence had become her soil. And in that soil, a forest now bloomed. They say a tree does not eat its own fruit. So when a woman plants strength, waters it with tears, and shields it from winds of betrayal, the ones who benefit are not always herself, but those who come after. By now, Abena's name was more than ink on paper. It was a seed in the hearts of thousands. Her life had become a mirror to young women across the continent. But even mirrors must be cleaned every so often, with humility, reflection, and sometimes, an unexpected gift from the past. Abena never bore children. Life did not make space for that road. First it was waiting until the business stabilized. Then, it was stress. Then betrayal. Then age, gently but firmly, closed the door. And yet, every week, dozens of young girls wrote her letters. "Dear Mama Abena," one began, written in careful English, "When I grow up, I want to wear glasses like yours and help other women. Thank you for building the school. My sister wants to come too." She read these letters at night, barefoot on her balcony, the wind in her scarf, tears on her cheek. Legacy, she had learned, is not always born. Sometimes, it's chosen. Shaped. Named. And love, well, love has many wombs. That season, the harmattan came early. Dry winds swept across Accra. The air carried dust from the north and memories from long ago. Abena began to dream again. This time, she was in a field of millet. Her grandmother was harvesting beside her, arms strong, back bent, humming an old Akan lullaby. When Abena looked closer, the millet stalks were words. Written names. The names of women. Some living. Some gone. Some yet to be born. She reached to gather them. Her grandmother said, "You are not the tree. You are the soil." And Abena woke up weeping not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming weight of purpose. 1 week later, she received a letter. From Kwaku. Not a message. Not an email. An envelope. Sealed in wax. Hand-delivered. Inside was a legal document. His will. It read, I, Kwaku Owusu, being of sound mind, hereby bequeath my remaining shares in Akansa Holdings to the AY Mensima Leadership Institute, in honor of the woman who built what I could not appreciate, and in the hope that the daughters she raises will do better than we did. Below was a note, thank you, Abena. For the forgiveness I never earned. For the legacy I now serve. She stared at it for a long time. Then whispered into the wind, he finally learned. That month, the Institute launched its first national conference. 1,000 girls. All scholarship recipients. All dressed in white and blue, seated beneath a giant tent, listening to women who looked like their mothers, lawyers, farmers, politicians, coders. When Abena stepped onto the stage, a slow drum beat began. Not entertainment. Honor. They rose to their feet as one. And she said, you are not the future. You are the fire. You are not waiting for permission. You are rewriting permission. You are not meant to be liked. You are meant to be respected. Cheers shook the sky. Her voice did not tremble. Because this, she knew, was her true boardroom. Far from the lights and applause, Kwaku was living his own truth. His health had weakened, but his spirit had steadied. He now taught 3 days a week. Volunteered on weekends. Lived quietly. Kindly. Without fanfare. He had accepted that his life would not be remembered for how high he climbed, but for how honestly he descended. One of his mentees, a boy named Kojo, once asked, Sir, do you regret it all? Kwaku smiled sadly. No. Because pain taught me what pride never could. And that, child, is how a man becomes wise. Not by winning, but by listening. Months later, Abena hosted a naming ceremony not for a child, but for a building. A new wing of the Institute. A library, digital lab, and training center. She called it, the House of the First Flame. And beneath the plaque, she listed names, her grandmother. Her mother. Women who mentored her. Young girls who had now become leaders. And yes, at the bottom, in small but respectful letters, Kwaku Owusu, a late learner, but a generous one. There was no bitterness. Only memory. Only story. One soft evening, as the sun folded itself into the sea, Abena sat alone with a bowl of roasted groundnuts and a glass of Sobolo. She was not planning. She was not writing. She was simply being. And as the first stars appeared, a thought rose in her heart like mist from the soil. I was never left behind. I was simply rerouted to greatness. They say when thunder rolls without rain, it is the ancestors speaking. Not to startle, but to remind. That power can be soft. That justice can be gentle. That the end of a story does not always come with fire, but with the sound of leaves falling on a still river. This is how we end, child. Not with shouts, but with echoes. It had been 2 years since the Institute opened its doors. Its walls now whispered in dozens of languages, Ga, Chi, Yoruba, Kiswahili, Lingala. It had become a sanctuary where girls learned not only to lead, but to listen. Abena sat in her office one warm Friday afternoon when her assistant walked in holding an envelope wrapped in gold and brown wax. It's from the Ministry of Education, the assistant said. Abena opened it. She had been chosen to give the closing speech at the African Continental Leadership Summit in Addis Ababa. A final platform. One more stage. But something inside her hesitated. Not because she was tired. Because she was full. Before the trip to Ethiopia, Abena returned once more to her roots. The compound house in Asafo was nearly empty now. Her mother had passed quietly a year before, in her sleep, wrapped in blue cloth and peace. She sat outside on the same stone she used to perch on as a girl, watching the mango tree sway. And the memories came back like music, the smell of charcoal. The flicker of kerosene lanterns. The sound of her mother humming while sewing. She closed her eyes. And she felt them. Not as ghosts. But as presence. You did well, a voice whispered. And she smiled. In Addis Ababa, Abena wore no heels. She walked barefoot onto the stage, dressed in pure white lace, her grey-streaked hair wrapped in a soft gold scarf. The auditorium hushed. Then, from the back, a group of girls began to sing. Soft. Gentle. The old lullaby her grandmother once hummed. She didn't prepare a speech. She simply said, "When I was a girl, I dreamed of being seen. Now, I dream of making others visible. I was once a wife. Then forgotten. Then feared. Now I am free. But more than anything, I am not alone. None of us are. We are roots in the same ground. And we bloom because others bled." Tears rolled. Not out of sadness. Out of recognition. And when she stepped down, a girl no older than 16 stood waiting. She held out a small carved gourd. "For you," she said, "because you poured into all of us." Abena took it with both hands, bowed her head, and wept not out of pain, but completion. In Accra, Kwaku was fading. His health had declined. His bones now carried more memory than muscle. But his eyes were clear. One day, a package arrived at Abena's doorstep. Inside, a wooden box. Carved by hand. Inside it, a pair of her old legal textbooks, dog-eared and annotated. On the cover of one, a note in his writing, "I kept these. Not to hold you back, but to remember who helped me rise. Thank you for letting me go." He passed weeks later. Quietly. Without regret. And at his funeral, she sat in the front row not as his former wife, but as his final friend. Of the Library of Names at the Institute, a new wing was unveiled, the Abena Yer Mensima Legacy Archive. Inside, stories. Not of her, but of the women she raised. Their names were etched into walls. Their writings were bound in gold. Their voices were recorded for the next generation. And in the center, beneath a soft dome of light, a single sculpture. A woman kneeling, head lifted, hands extended not in asking, but in offering. The plaque read, "She rose, so others would not have to crawl." On her 70th birthday, Abena rose early. The sea air was soft. The birds, bold. She walked to the beach near Kokrobite, barefoot in the sand, the hem of her wrapper catching the tide. She stood at the edge of the water, hands folded behind her back, and whispered a prayer. "Thank you for the fire. For the ashes. For the wings." Then turned, smiling, to face the sunrise. So now, child, if you ever walk past a girl with braided hair, fierce eyes, and a folder full of dreams, know that she may carry a bit of Abena within her. And if you ever see a man sitting quietly in a market corner, listening more than he speaks, he, too, may carry the lessons of Kwaku. Because in this land, stories never die. They change clothes. They change voices. But they live. In us. And in the thunder that follows silence.